So thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Bhaveen and Bhaveen Ali, and I work at University of Sheffield in Health Sciences School as the Senior Lecturer and Deputy Director of Research and Innovation. My research area is gender-based violence and domestic abuse. And as you know, this week was violence against women. Like 25th November started off as Violence Against Women Day, and then we are in the 16 days of activism. So this webinar, I'm leading an international uh, network called World University Network of on Partner Violence. So the aim is to try and look at the mental health impacts of domestic abuse and how do we understand that. And as part of that network, we also conduct regular webinars to just increase awareness about domestic abuse and its impact. And today is one of those webinars. Um, and and it coincides with the Violence Against Women Day and 16 Days of Activism. So I hope you're going to find useful. A little bit about the speaker today. So we have got Nida Jamshed today. Nida is a second year PhD student in social psychology program at Clark University in USA. And she's working with Dr. Nicole Overstreet and Dr. Andrew Stewart. She graduated from Fatima Jinnah Women University in Pakistan, and her MPhil was looking at was in psychology, and she worked on exploring sexual harassment, rape myths, and sexual double standards among university students and in Pakistan. Currently, Nida is doing her PhD, and she's broadly interested in violence against women, intersectionality, and resistance. And she is focused on exploring how intersectionality explains and understands the use of different everyday resistant practices by women in slums areas, especially within the context of Pakistan. So today she's going to talk about social dominance, sexual double standards, and violence against women in US as well as in Pakistan. So hopefully it will be a really useful thing for all of us to listen to and to communicate later on. So the format is that Nida is going to talk about her work and explain the research for about 30 to 40 minutes. Is that okay, Nida? Yeah. And then we can have question and answers. So in the meantime, if you have got any questions, please keep on writing into the chat box, and we will take that as we finish off. And Nida will be able to answer it, and we'll also have a discussion among colleagues who are on the call today. Okay, so again, thank you so much for joining. I'll keep on looking at the people who are joining in. Apologies for the error with the connection. There was something wrong with the Zoom, and therefore it wouldn't let me in my own account. So I had to change the account and bring you in through another account. So thank you so much for being prompt in looking into that information and joining us. So over to you, Nida.
Hi, everyone. As Dr. Parveen already shared that I'm Nida Jamshed and I'm second year doctoral student in Clark University, USA. And firstly, thank you so much, Dr. Parveen, for inviting me for this webinar. I feel really very honored. And the research work that I will talk about is actually based on my first year research project that I conducted during my first year in Clark University. And I was primarily interested in looking at how violence against women manifests in the context of the US and Pakistan, and does the social dominance has any kind of relationship with violence against women, like how social dominance contribute to violence against women in two very different cultural contexts, US and Pakistan. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this work was primarily based on the principles of the social dominance theory. So basically, social dominance theory posits that all human societies tend to be organized as group-based social hierarchies, including hierarchies based on gender, age, and other arbitrary group distinctions, for example, race and religion. And in such societies, violent and non-violent discrimination against less powerful groups contribute to intergroup inequality. And also, social dominance theory argues that different cultural ideologies stereotypes and myths function to either increase the inequality, for example, the hierarchy enhancing ideologies, or there are some myths or ideologies that are used to decrease the inequality, that is, hierarchy attenuating ideologies. And sexual double standards are basically the patterns of gendered expectations in which boys are expected to be sexually active, dominant, and assertive in sexual activity, while women or girls are expected to be sexually submissive, passive, and shy. So, till date, research has shown the endorsement of sexual double standard is associated with several like worse health consequences, particularly the poor mental and physical health, and also these sexual double standards contribute to the violence against women everywhere. Although there is evidence that sexual double standards are linked with these outcomes, but there is limited research in terms of like where there are similarities and differences exist cross culturally in the relationship between the sexual double standards and violence against women, particularly in cultures with tight and loose norms around sexuality. So, this study actually examined the sexual double standards, social dominance, orientation, and violence against women in the context of United States and Pakistan. Moreover, we also examined the robustness of sexual double standards above and beyond the general attitudes toward women. For example, considering the hostile and ambivalent sexism. Now I will talk about the relationship between the sexuality norms, sexual double standards, and violence against women, and will also talk about the cultural context because we know that the US and Pakistan culture differs from each other, and there's a very wide, or we can say that there's a big difference between the culture of the US and Pakistan. So, in many patriarchal cultures, the media, familial socialization, religious principles, and cultural norms in society propagate the gender and sexuality norms, consisting of different expectation of standards for sexual relationships among boys and girls. So, basically, theorizing on sexual double standards suggests that norms around sexuality depend upon cultural, contextual, and individual differences. For example, the endorsement of sexual double standards may vary from culture to culture and even within the cultures, depending on whether norms surrounding the sexual double standards are clearly defined, are they pervasive, and are reliably imposed across three levels that are macro, micro, and meso levels. So the in this study, actually, we considered uh, Pakistan as an example of a tight culture, whereas US as an example of the loose culture. So, in tight cultures, obviously the sexual norms are very clearly defined. They are highly pervasive and they are reliably imposed across all three levels that are macro, micro, and meso level. Whereas the case in loose cultures, for example, US is opposite to that of tight culture. So the tight loose cultural dimension is basically the part of an interconnected multi-level system operating at macro, micro, and meso level that stems from different social institutions and social norms related to sexuality and how they are regulated in society. For example, but not limited to high surveillance in production and dissemination of information and specific criteria for regulation of women behaviors, particularly related to their sexuality. So I've already discussed that cultures that are characterized as tight and loose um, have differences on the basis of how sexuality norms are imposed in society. So in this study, we actually use the research as the basis for considering Pakistan as the tight culture and US as the loose culture. We actually used the study by Gelfand and colleagues that was conducted in 2011. And this study identified Pakistan as a tight culture and the United States as a loose culture. So, some of the strict norms in Pakistan for women include the specific criteria for women's dressing, requirement to cover their heads in public and sometimes in private affairs too, proscription on multiple sexual partners, limited freedom to choose their romantic partners, restrictions on mobility, and no control on their reproduction and sexuality. That is, women cannot decide the number of children that they want to have after marriage, and restriction on women's socialization and friendships, not allowed to meet their potential partners before marriage, and no acceptance for different sexual orientation and gender identities other than typical gender binaries. Whereas loose sexual norms in US includes the freedom of choosing different sexual orientations and gender identities, freedom to have multiple sexual partners, no strict or specific criteria for women dressing and physical appearance, no restrictions on sex before marriage for women in US, or no restriction on women's mobility. However, it is also important to consider that within United States, these sexual norms differ for different groups of women. For example, these sexual norms can differ from different marginalized groups of women, for example, Black women, African American women, women of color, or the immigrant women. But in both tight and loose cultures, sexual double standards legitimize the gender inequality and contribute to violence against women. So, in tight cultures like Pakistan, norm violators, especially women, are punished by society as well as by their family in harsh ways, such as honor killing, murder threats, subjected to extreme isolation, forced marriages, extreme control, and regulation on their movement by their fathers, brothers, and husbands, and in some extreme cases, forced marriages with Quran or whipping in front of public and village, physical violence, domestic abuse, acid attacks, and looked down by others. However, in loose cultures, for example, in United States, women, particularly white, are punished in different ways. For example, isolation, limited contact with family and friends for if they violate the sexual norms. But it is also again important to consider that these consequences also differ for different groups of women even within the United States. For example, the consequences or the punishment for different marginalized groups of women, for example, Black women, African American women, women of color, immigrant women, would be different from the punishment or consequences that white women are likely to experience due to violation of sexual norms. But we can say that while norm violators may face, a greater violence in tight culture versus the loose cultures on average, but the processes that are involved in supporting the violence against women who violate the sexuality norms may be similar across cultures. Um, I have already discussed and explained the relationship between the social dominance theory and sexual double standard. But now I will again briefly talk about this relationship because the basis of this study was based on the principles of the social dominance theory and how it is related with the violence against women and sexual double standard. So, social dominance theory basically provides a theoretical explanation for how sexual double standards may contribute to supporting violence against women who violate the sexuality norms across culture. And social dominance theory posits that all human society tends to be organized as group-based social hierarchies, where ideologically justified discrimination disproportionately allocate resources across different groups, and these inequalities are maintained when different cultural ideologies, myths, and stereotypes, for example, sexual double standards prescribe discrimination such as violence against women. And so, sexual double standards are actually considered as the legitimizing myths because they prescribe norms around sexuality for men, boys, and women, girls. So, in this study, we actually tested this theoretical model. So this study was based on the theoretical model that was based on social dominance theory. That social dominance theory predicts the justification of violence against women who violate the normative expectations for women to be submissive to men via sexual double standards. We also hypothesize that people who desire group based dominance will support violence against women who violate the gendered norms in relations because they have different expectations for women and men's sexual behavior. We also tested the robustness of sexual double standards above and beyond more general attitudes toward women, considering the hostile and ambivalent sexism in predicting the justification of violence among US and Pakistani individuals. So, this research was very important in this regard because it provided us the comparative situation of endorsement of sexual double standards and violence against women between the two very different contexts, that is United States and Pakistan. And yeah, so this was basically purely a quantitative study in which we used the survey, and the survey was collected from total 315 participants, like 174 participants from US and 141 participants from Pakistan. From the US, I've collected data using the Prolific platform. Prolific platform is basically the paid platform in which researchers are able to upload their surveys on that platform and collect the data. And for US participants, I also paid some monetary compensation for the survey. While for sample from Pakistan, I posted the advertisement of my study on different sites for the social media, for example, the Facebook, Instagram, and then I also emailed this survey to my colleagues and friends back in Pakistan and also requested them to forward this survey to their colleagues and friends. So in total, I've so the total number of participants were 315, including both the sample from the US and Pakistan. So these are some of the demographic characteristics used in this study that are mentioned in this table. And these are the measures that were used in this study. So as you know that I worked with social dominance orientation, sexual double standards, also use the tightness and looseness scale in order to check like whether Pakistan in my studies also um, uh, considering or is also coming as a tight culture and US as the loose culture. Then I also use the justification of violence scale. And in order to test the robustness of sexual double standard, I also use the alternative model of sexism to see like whether the sexual double standard is an important variable even with the inclusion of sexism variable, for example, hostile and benevolent sexism. Okay. So for for the analysis for the data that I obtained for this study, I did the structural equation modeling, basically the part testing the path. So you can say the model testing, and then I also use the measurement invariance because the same kind of instruments were used with the participants from US as well as the participants from the Pakistan. So for the measurement invariance, I explored the three kinds of model: a configural model. Then the second one was a metric model where all loadings for latent variables were considered to be equal between the two countries. And the third was a scalar model where all item intercepts were constrained to be equal between the two countries. So if we establish like the metric invariance, we can compare the path estimates between the two countries. And if we establish the scalar invariance, then we are able to compare the means between the two countries. And then for the structural equation modeling or within the measurement invariance for each construct separately. We also estimated like three different kinds of model. So the first one was a fully unconstrained model where all intercepts and factor loadings are said to vary freely across nations. Second was a constrained model where factor loadings are said to be equal to assess the metric invariance. And third was a model constraining where intercepts are said to be equal across nations to assess the scalar invariance. Okay. So we got the good model fit for each of the variable, and the values of the model fit are mentioned in this table. And these are the values for the descriptive statistics like the mean and standard deviations for the variables that are used in this study, and also the correlations for the variables that were used in this study. And I calculated the correlation separately for the United States and Pakistan. So you can see those correlations in this table. Okay. So basically, this is the figure that shows the theoretical model that is already that I already talked about, and then this figure actually represent the final results of the analysis that we found in this study. So in sum, metric invariance was established for all variables. Scalar variance was only established for justification of violence, while for all other variables such as sexual double standard, tightness and looseness, and social dominance orientation, it was not established. So our primary hypothesis was actually to involve the comparisons of the path estimates between the two countries, which we can proceed because we have established the metric invariance, and metric invariance allows you to compare the path estimates across the nations. But because we had not established the scalar invariance, so we cannot compare the means for these variables across the countries. So the um, the results of the analysis showed that the path estimates from sexual double standards to justification of violence are statistically significant, as you can see from this figure, for both United States and Pakistan. And in both the US and Pakistan, social dominance orientation significantly predicted the sexual double standards, and direction of this relationship was positive with strong strength. Social dominance orientation was not a significant predictor of justification of violence against women in this model for both countries. So, sexual double standards were found to be a statistically significant predictor of justification of violence for both countries. Then, as already discussed, we also tested the robustness of sexual double standards in predicting the justification of for violence against women in an alternative model that also included the sexism variable that are hostile and benevolent sexism. So the path estimate from sexual double standards to justification of violence for US and Pakistan were statistically significant, and sexual double standards, even with the presence of the sexism variable, sexual double standards predicted the justification of violence for both US and Pakistan. So the final findings for this study were, as already like explained, social dominance predicted the justification of violence, but only via the endorsement of sexual double standard in both countries, because our testing model showed that there is not direct relationship between the social dominance orientation and sexual double standard, while social dominance predicted the violence against women only via the endorsement of sexual double standard. And then we also use the alternative model in this study, including the sexism variable, to establish the robustness of sexual double standard. and the robustness of sexual double standard was established despite the presence of, sexism variable, hostile and benevolent. So we can say that sexual double standard is a very important component that actually contributes to the violence against women, because we have seen its robustness despite the presence of the sexism variable in the model. Then justification of violence were predicted by sexual double standard directly, with and without sexism variables in an alternative model, like uh, even when sexism variables were not included in the model, justification of violence were predicted by sexual double standard. And even with the inclusion of the sexism variables, justification of violence was still predicted by sexual double standard. So overall, we can say that this study actually debunks some of the very common myths that are used to, spread Islamophobia generally and in the context of violence against women, because whenever uh, whenever like scholars from west or anywhere, they talk about the violence against women in Pakistan, they generally attribute the reason of violence against women to the faith system, that is Islam, and Islamophobia is usually considered as the main reason behind the violence against women in that women experience in Pakistan or any other Muslim country. So our study showed that the processes that actually support the violence against women are similar across tight cultures versus the loose culture. For example, like in this study, I've used the context of the Pakistan and US. So I would say that the processes that support the violence against women are same in both countries, in both cultures, in the United States as well as Pakistan. So there's no difference between the processes that are, different in United States versus the Pakistan, but there are similar processes like sexual double standard, social dominance, orientation, and all these things contribute to violence against women in both Pakistan as well as United States. And then the findings of this study also suggest that, policies relevant to violence against women in both countries should be inclusive and beneficial for every group of women, considering the qualitative differences in experience even within the same group of women. Because usually in Pakistan, what happens, like we do have the policies relevant to the violence against women, but those policies only cater to the specific group of women. For example, the middle class or, elite class women, they are not formed considering the problems or the violence that poor women experience in Pakistan. And same is the case in the United States, because within the United States, different groups of women experience different kind of violence and different problems, but the policies that are present in United States only cater to the dominant group women, that are white women, while ignoring all the other diverse groups of women. For example, black women, African American women, immigrant women, or the women of color, or even the uh, poor women. So it is very important that this study showed that, as violence against women is a global problem and it is prevalent everywhere. So this study suggests that the policies that are relevant to the violence against women in both countries should be inclusive and beneficial for every group of women, and they should not only cater to the certain groups of women, because policies are only beneficial when they can provide benefit to all groups of women instead of providing benefit to certain chunk of women. And this study, again, like, it is very important in debunking like some of the common myths that are very highly prevalent against the violence that women in developing countries experience, or particularly the women and the violence that women in Muslim countries experience. So this study is particularly very successful in debunking those myths, because it shows that the processes that actually support the violence against women are similar in United States as well as in Pakistan. So we cannot say that, in United States, the violence that women experience are due to different reasons, and then due to different processes. And in Pakistan, the violence that women experience are due to different processes. But our study showed that the processes are similar. The context can differ, but the processes that support the violence against women are similar across both contexts. Yeah. So this was a small summary of my research. So I hope every would be able to understand. I know like there is a lot of like statistical terms that I use, and because it was purely a quantitative study, but I hope like I summarize the results in a good way that was understandable to all. Thank you. Thank you
So
for listening.
thank you so much, Nida. That was really useful. I will open the floor for questions and we'll take questions. And while people are uh, trying to think of their questions and explain it here, I would suggest, so you have got all these participants in your study, right, from Pakistan and from US. If you were to go back to them and explain the results of this study so that they can understand what it actually means without using any statistical terms or anything like that, what will you say? How are you going to describe? Could you, what is the main message coming out of your study? I'm just asking you to push you a little bit to think, and also for the benefit of people who probably are not that used to with the statistics and quantitative research.
Yeah. So basically, like in simple terms, if we just exclude the statistical analysis and everything, because mainly my research was based on like uh, two variables, social dominance orientation and sexual double standard, that tried to predict like whether violence against women has any kind of relationship with that variables or not. So social dominance orientation is basically when people have a belief on the dominance. Dominance means that when people believe that certain groups of people are more powerful or more higher in status as compared to other group of people. For example, like in terms of Pakistan, we know that Pakistan has a patriarchal culture where people believe that, men have more power, and they occupy like more higher position in each domain of life, whether it's financial, whether it's interpersonal, whether it's private or public. So this study basically tells that if you have these kinds of beliefs, and if you have a strong faith on these kinds of belief, then your thinking and your ways of living would actually contribute to violence against women and would actually support the violence against women. And
So
then on the
basically, so basically,
yeah,
what we are saying is that in patriarchal culture, and generally, if people have belief on standard gender norms that women should be doing this and women should be doing that, and men should be doing this and men should be doing that, that's what contributes to domestic abuse and violence against women generally into the to the environment in which we live in. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what about the other word, which was sexual double standards?
Yeah, so basically, the sexual double standard is this actually the gendered expectation. It again links with the traditional gender roles that we have. Different kind of expectations that men should act in this way, and women should act on this way, or women should only belong to the private sphere, while the public sphere is only limited to the men. So it this study also suggests that if you believe on those kind of the traditional gender roles, that will manifest themselves in your behaviors in your daily life, so that also contributes to violence against women, and that also supports the processes that lead to the violence against women. So
Mm.
so basically the crux of this study is that if you believe in the dominance of certain groups, and if you have a high belief on like traditional gender roles, and your thinking is oriented in that way, you are likely to contribute towards violence against women. So
Yeah,
the message
we did
basically, yeah.
we did a similar sort of Morgan scaling analysis of demographic health survey. in South Asian countries, and we figured out the same sort of thing, that it's not actually the religion, or it's not actually the setting where you live in. It is about your attitudes towards women, your attitudes towards gender, and your attitudes towards what is expected of women and what is expected of men, which predicts the behavior and which contributes to domestic abuse. So basically what we are saying is that there needs to be some changes and some value clarification as around those things, that to make men think more about it and women think more about it, what their role is, and challenge those assumptions than anything else, which is changing a little bit, but still is the what do you call it, the destination is really very, very far.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
any
it's a long
questions,
way to
please?
go.
What we would like to do is, if you have got any questions, please raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you, and you can ask your question. Or if you prefer to type, you could type in the chat box as well. So I'm just going to press this button, and then you will all have the ability to unmute yourself if you are asking for question. So if you're looking at if you look at the names of the people, if it's coming on your screens, or the participant list, it's usually give you a place where it says gives you an option of raising your hand. Okay. So Haley Virginia, please, you can
Yeah.
unmute yourself.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Really, I learned a lot. I come from a clinical psych background, so it was sort of nice to have that real world, you know, conversation about it. But I guess specifically my question is, this is one study. I'm wondering sort of like if you plan to continue researching this, or sort of what you can plan to do with the findings of the study moving forward, and if you've thought about that. But yeah, really great job. I learned so much, and I'm really grateful I got to see you speak.
Thank you, Haley. Yes, Nida.
Yeah, thank you so much, Haley, and thank you so much for listening about my research work. Yes, I really plan to, uh, continue using these variables in my future studies. This was actually you can say uh, the foundation for my next future studies that I plan to do. I am actually, my area of work is again like gender based violence, and my next study is trying to explore the gender based violence, especially prevalent in the slum settings in Pakistan, and how the women in those slums settings resist the violence using the everyday resistance practices. So yeah, I definitely plan to continue using these variables and continue using the same like broader theme in my future work. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure.
This is Ruby. I just wanted to ask how much research is actually available in Pakistan of the abuses that are happening out there? Because it's an area I'm particularly interested in for the work that I do. And yes, thank you so much. It was a lovely presentation, Nida.
Sure. Nida, do you want to answer that? And then I can add up.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And I would say that there is a plenty of research available in Pakistan, but most of the research in Pakistan, they explore the factors, or you can say the causes or the reasons behind the violence against women. But if you are looking for the specific facts or the statistical figures indicating the domestic violence in Pakistan, so I would say that one would not be able to get the accurate data. I think there are several reasons for that because Pakistan being a the patriarchal culture, and then there's a lot of stigma, still like a lot of stigma and taboo around the domestic violence, and women do not like to talk about their violence experience, and even if they talk, then they are likely to experience certain kind of consequences. So one would not be able to find the exact statistical data or figures, but you can be able to get at least like some idea of it, or maybe you can be able to get like some qualitative studies explaining that, but I don't think so. Like if one is interested in finding, because even in my study, when I try to look at different literature, and even I tried like different organizations in Pakistan who are working in these areas, so they also like didn't have the updated data, because due to several reasons, like due to several problems in data collection, and then the stigma, taboo, and then like sometimes they are not allowed to share their findings with other entities. So yeah, I think in statistical terms you might not get the exact figure.
Another problem with data, I think the issue with the prevalence and actual data is all around the world. So we don't really know actual prevalence of domestic abuse or violence against women all around the world because of the how definitions are used in various different countries, how which measures are used in various different countries, underreporting, response to to people who respond, and various different things really. When it comes to Pakistan, I agree that we have got a lot of descriptive research which describes the problem. And we have got research which explains the experiences of people for past. And most of the research has surfaced since 1990s. So in the past 30 years or so, there has been some research that has explained various different elements. Initially, that research was conducted from the healthcare professionals' perspective, and from the interest of healthcare professionals, like for example gynecologists or
Yeah.
people who were working in outpatient departments, doctors, nurses, and that sort of stuff. We didn't really have a lot of social scientist related research. We do also have some research which talks about intervention, but I think the bigger problem with any research in Pakistan, India, and many different countries, which I guess we are trying to answer a little bit, is that we used the definitions and we used the questionnaires developed in the West in Pakistan. So this was something
Yeah.
which I found that, when I was doing my undergraduate and master's studies in year 2000, early 2000s, what I thought that, if you pick up a research article, you would find domestic abuse or sexual violence 99%, 98%, and you would question that why is it like that? If it is happening to that much extent, it should be, you should see this everywhere in every house, but so there was some discrepancy into this stuff. So that then I looked at the work conducted as part of my PhD study, looking at the definitions that we use. And it's interesting
Yeah.
because in those countries, we don't necessarily, how we define violence is different, and how it happens is
Yes.
different. So for example, verbal abuse may not be considered a form of abuse, and that's true with Pakistan, that's true
Yes.
with India, that's true with Saudi Arabia, that's true with my PhD student is here, Turkey, and Moni is here, so they'll be able to add something to it. So many developing countries, there are certain elements that we do not necessarily see as abuse, and also how the data is collected. So if the researcher is asking them, oh, okay, was your partner or your wife was willing to have sexual contact with you? Now it depends on how the date question is asked and how the person is going to answer, because they would just think, well, if I say my wife was willing, that means she's a bad character woman. So I don't want to say, so that, yes, I forced her or I said her, not thinking that when you are saying you forced her, it actually is an abusive
Yes.
context. So there is domestic abuse is quite prevalent because it's a patriarchal culture, but at the
Yeah.
same time, how we approach and how we see is quite problematic. And the result of that is then that we are not able to develop interventions which work for people and which can help change the behavior among the general population, if that makes sense. Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
it kind of does, because this is a difficulty I'm having. I'm doing a lot of interventions here, and I've done them in America as well. I'm in London, and I've done them in America, and I was looking at people in Pakistan, and this whole thing about the language and the questions and the way things are received and perceived, because obviously in England, you've got a criminal justice system that operates in a specific way. In America, it's very different. Each of these things adds to the experiences of the people. So when I'm working with Muslim women here in England, we now have to be careful because of the prevent agenda. People don't want to go to the proper services because one they're not understood. The dynamics of the patriarchy, culture, and religion are not understood. And then the interventions are very Eurocentric. And as Nida had pointed out earlier, that the policies in America are targeted for white women and not taking care of, forget all the diversity of races, but even a rich white woman and a poor white woman. So what I'm trying to think about for Pakistan is how we gather that in the right way, because I'm quite interested in doing things over there and here because it all ties up. But we don't seem to be even skimming the surface yet. And I was trying to get...
Yeah, here, for example, when you talk to, I mean, there are so many issues around it, which some of them are generally applicable to all those women. When it comes to Muslim women, or when it comes to women from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds, it becomes even more pronounced. Like, for example, language barriers, some of this other stuff that we already know. But it's the fear that if they are going to open up, their children are going to be taken away. What their legal status is into this country. Do they have access to their passports and other aspects? And it would be interesting to speak to you, because I did quite a lot of work in that, and there's quite a lot of interesting stuff which comes in, which then requires, because my work is around health and care and social care professionals, and how do we equip them to be able to support these women effectively. When you are asking about Pakistan, I think Pakistan, we are a place where we've only kind of, if I say that we've only started talking about these issues, I think I'm probably I'm not the wrong one. Recently, there was a rape case in, it's a few months back, isn't it, Nida? Which was in motorway. And that sparked a lot of discussion, a lot of issues, a lot of discussion around the concept, because of one of the police officers and how he described it. He said, why did she go out? And why was she driving at the midnight? And why there was no men with her and all the rest of the stuff, which he really got really kind of, bad treatment from everyone. But in a way, I was thankful to him. The reason being that at least he said something which sparked a discussion. And people started talking about that particular aspect. What he said was not appropriate, but that gave us an idea of the thinking and of the, how do we think? How do we kind of, and made people think and question those things that, is that really a good thing to do? So in that sense, we are just only scraping the surface. But I think at least we have started talking about it. At least we have started opening up about it. People are happy to share their, or at least I wouldn't say happy to share, but at least they're a little bit more comfortable in sharing their experiences of groping, of eve teasing, how women are treated in public sphere, and all the rest of this stuff, or child abuse. So I think it's very new start, and there are very few people who are working on those areas in Pakistan as well as in the UK when it comes to BME women. But yes, and myself and many colleagues would be really happy to help you with.
And I think I would,
and go on, Nida. You were saying something.
Both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would further add that I agree with Dr. Parveen that now, like Pakistan, the Pakistani women, and I would say like a lot of Pakistani organizations have started considering or addressing these issues, and especially from the last, like I think past 2 or 3 years, every year in March we are having the women march or the women movement in Pakistan that was actually based on the feminist ideas or principle. Although I don't like completely agree with what they are like proposing, but at least like I'm happy to say that now, like in Pakistan, people have started talking and addressing these issues, and this also gave confidence and encouragement to the women who are undergoing violence to experience their to share their experiences like openly. We still have a long way to go, but at least like now people have started to you know started to openly discuss these things, and I hope that in near future like other people and especially the NGOs and other organizations who work on these issues will address these issues effectively. And then I think in the chat box, like someone asked that whether there's any like implementation or policy work related to these issues in Pakistan. So I would say that yes, we definitely have the laws, the specific laws and policies addressing these issues, but there's a lot of like loopholes, or you can say the flaws in that problems, and even the laws that are made for these issues are not executed or implemented properly. So they are mostly the laws and policies that are based on, domestic violence, and the violence against women only caters to the, specific set of women, for example, the middle and elite class women, while all the women are ignored. For example, the poor class women are from other backgrounds while creating these laws. So we do have
I
like
think,
specific implementation frameworks, but yeah, the
yeah,
problems
I
remain.
think the biggest problem, like any countries, I mean, the strength of Pakistan and many developing countries is especially Pakistan. We have got laws which are really excellent. So if you look at the laws, and if you look at how they are developed, and how what sort of things they cater, um, it's excellent. When it comes to implementation, that's where the problem is, and that's where the attitudes, and that's where the attitudes of police officers, attitudes of healthcare professionals, attitudes of general public, it's something that doesn't allow those things to be implemented. A low literacy level of women's involvement, less involvement of women into the economic activities, and therefore not being therefore the inability to economically support themselves, and many other various aspects contribute to the situation which is there. But when it comes to, if you went in and tried to look into the laws, you will find plenty of laws which are available. It's the implementation which is problematic in a country like Pakistan. Anybody else? Any other questions, please? Thank you, Moni. Okay, great. If there are not questions, then thank you so much for that. Please do feel free to contact myself or Nida. Nida, would you be happy to share your email address as well, please, here?
Yeah.
And if we can be of help with anything, if it's about working with Pakistani women or working with researchers in Pakistan, we'll hopefully be able to support and help with all those things. Or if it is about talking about in any, I'll be more than happy to help and talk and do some work, Ruby, if there is anything to do with Muslim women, BME women, or South Asian women sort of stuff, or any other aspect. Sure. Apologies about some of the problems with the connections earlier on. And thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for the questions as well. I did share a link earlier on. So if any one of you would like to have a certificate, please fill up that form and I will be able to send you a soft copy of your certificate to your email address. And just let me, if there is any other, I'll just wait for a couple of minutes. If there are any questions, then that's fine. If not, thank you so much. It would be great to take a picture of all of you. So if you don't mind putting up your cameras on and we can take a picture, if that's okay. But otherwise, do get back to us and do give any feedback if you may have.
Thank you.
Rida, would you stop sharing your slides? So let's see if people are more happy to open their cameras and we can perhaps take a photo. Thank you so much, Nida. I know it's been quite early for you and it's Saturday. So we tried to accommodate time in a way that it was possible for all those places and everybody. So thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me for this webinar. Yeah.
You're welcome. So are we up for taking a picture? So I'll just take it as to whoever are around. I always forget how to take that. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. And Nida, would you stay for 2 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll stop recording.